Welcome to Invisible Fronts. I'm Peter Clarke with Rachel Haywire and Raven Connolly, and today our special guest is Liza Libes, a writer and cultural critic who runs Pins and Poisons on Substack and YouTube. Liza was recently involved in a controversy that I'm sure we'll get into today. But first, Liza, give us an intro into who you are and what you're up to in the literary world.
Yeah, so my name is Liza. First of all, thank you guys so much for having me on the podcast today. As Peter said, I do a lot of Substack, kind of social media, and I run a Substack called Pens and Poison. The reason I started Pens and Poison was really, first of all, to talk about literature. That's always been my thing. But within literature, I started to notice that kind of so many of these literary spaces have been taken over by the sort of far left machine, whether that's kind of in academia and in publishing or just even online. If you go on like something like Book Talk, right? Everyone's kind of the far left persuasion, I should say. So I really saw a gap in terms of how we approach literature and how we think about literature. To me, literature has always been about kind of exploring these sorts of big questions that make us human. So, like questions like, what is the purpose of my existence if we will all, perish one day from this earth? Or, what is love? And a lot of these questions are very much embedded in so many different literary works. And the issue I started to see was that these questions were really being pushed to the sideline to talk about racism and colonialism and gender and all of these issues that I like to call particulars rather than universals. And so I really wanted to create a space that, first of all, brought awareness to the issue, because I think a lot of people think that studying Marx in conjunction with English literature is just the default or the norm. Or people will think that, colonialism is just part of studying literature. And I that's fundamentally incorrect in my view. And there's a lot of history that's gone into, the way that literature departments across the world have kind of adopted these ideologies. And so first of all, I wanted to, create a space to bring awareness to that. And second of all, I wanted to, talk about literature from this kind of non-woke perspective, talk about it from the universal lens, and really, again, bring attention to the way that literature kind of can bring us all together rather than tearing us apart, which I think is what the sort of universities are attempting to do right now. So I created Pens and Poison, started off on kind of YouTube, then I went to Instagram and then started a Substack. So it's been on Substack for a little over a year now. It grew very quickly. Just, I think a lot of people were resonating with a lot of my ideas. I started to get traction, as happens with anyone, I think, who starts to get traction. There's always going to be some pushback. So that is, the drama that Peter has alluded to. But yeah, I mean, I love doing what I do. I kind of split my time between running Pens and Poisons, various outlets, and working in college counseling, which was kind of my full-time gig, where I get to work with students. So yeah, that's a little bit about me.
I had a question for you, because you seem very anti-Marxist indoctrination and you're sick of all the colonialism, blah, blah, but you were also kind of charged at by a mob, and they seemed very upset that you were saying things that offended them, and a lot of them seemed to be, more right-leaning men. I thought you would have been harassed by more, anti-colonialists. How did that come to be?
I guess what happened from my perspective was I started seeing just these kind of, there were three of them that I know of, and then there were a bunch of more came to their defense, and they just started basically ironically reposting everything that I was saying and just basically mocking me. And it had been going on for a couple months. There was, I think, one post that went a little bit more viral that they had that really just convinced me that I needed to kind of push back, because I just genuinely didn't know what their beef with me was. My guess is that they're maybe trying to occupy the same space as me, and I have just been more successful at addressing the issues that maybe they wanted to address. And so, jealousy, I think, drives people to do all sorts of strange things.
I mean, I think, like, from what I witnessed, if you don't mind me butting in, and I think Raven can probably relate to this, is women who are covering these types of topics, we often piss off men who do view us as competitors, rather than allies. What I saw, Raven, how do you think that goes? Are we being competed against? Is this an issue of competition?
I mean, it sounds like that could be the beginning of it, as a competitive feeling. I think that's a good guess. And I mean, also there's other stuff that can be more irrational that comes up as well. They always like to say men are the rational sex, but we know that's not true.
The libidinal forces coming out of the testosterone land. I mean, what I saw, Lisa, was you were talking about idiots. I mean, the blog post that I liked, I think that's the one that went viral. You were just saying, wow, these are a bunch of illiterate morons. But I think that you really triggered people by using the term fedora. Is that correct? You used the F word?
I guess so. Again, I'm not... I didn't know that was going to be such an issue. I didn't know that I was going to piss so many people off. In my view, I think there are the sort of demographic of human that I've always been the most annoyed at, and I saw a lot of these people when I was doing my kind of English degree at Columbia, was this kind of like pseudo-intellectual man who like reads Jacques Derrida and comments on, the world without like really ever having lived in the world, and really doesn't know what he's talking about beyond these kind of buzzwords. And those are the sorts of men that I saw were attacking me. And again, just from the way that they positioned their attack, it was mocking, right? It wasn't like, I disagree with your idea, let me, explain why. It was just, this bitch is dumb. That was kind of the vibe that I got. And I think that, if they had a beef with my idea, then yes, then maybe you would have seen some criticism from these kind of leftist types. And maybe, I don't like the leftist types either, but maybe at least they would have presented a sort of counter argument. The way that this was presented was, it was very much this sort of mocking aggression. And that I think bothers me, because then that it's not coming from a genuine place, and that it's not the kind of ideas, it's just there's something about me that is pissing them off. And again, I think what I said in my article was that a lot of these men are like trying to be intellectuals and failing, because they don't have much to say that's original beyond just putting other people down. And, and one of my kind of Substack friends / colleagues, they'd also been going after him. And he's also, a lot more successful than them, maybe kind of occupies the same space as me. And so I started to see that there was this pattern of the way that they were getting audience members and traction was by shooting other people down. And I think that that's a very intellectually dishonest way to go about writing and just go about, thinking in general, and just go about being an online Substacker. And so I felt that it was my kind of prerogative to call them out, because I don't think that there would have been as much of the mocking side of things if, I were a male who was maybe embodying a similar aesthetic. Then maybe they would have seen me as like a brother of some sort. But yes, they saw me instead as this sort of like competition, as someone who was maybe more clearly articulating the points that they had failed to articulate in the past. And I think that just got on a lot of their nerves. And then so after I ran this article, there was a lot more pushback. Again, I wasn't sitting there reading all of the hate comments that were being published against me. I was, I guess, trending on Substack for a day or two because there were so many of them. I wasn't going to read all of them. I did read some of the positive ones. Yeah, so I think that's, eventually it kind of died down. Maybe there's still a little bit of it going on, but, as with any internet fad, it has a lifespan of about an afternoon. So, here we are, I think.
I want to pick up on that a little bit, because I think that, there's something in there that totally resonates with me. Like the Helen Andrews thing, how she blames women for wokeness. Do you guys remember that? She had like an article in Compact magazine about how
Yeah.
all the workplaces started opening themselves up to like women, and they entered the hierarchy, then like everything got woke, right? I think that like in the literary space, this is very much true of any space in the universe. Like, if you try to market a book right now and you go to literary agencies, every single literary agent in the country is a woman, and like a leftist woman. And I used to work for a literary agency and with a woman, and she was great. And I don't want to demean all these people, but like, it's just kind of true, right?
Yeah.
And the space that I'm also kind of a part of in the literary world of like being against that and just being kind of like heterodox or just like anything but the woke thing. Men, this is not me, but like a lot of men think that that's their own space. And like, I think that like maybe they would see you coming in on that and genuinely feeling like, hey, this is my side of the field, right? Or what are you doing playing my game?
I think there's a lot of truth to that. I mean, I think the biggest, the article that, one of the articles that really got me a lot of attention was, I wrote this article called The Strange Death of Literary Men. And I wrote about how basically this phenomenon of liberal women run publishing, they publish books by other liberal women. There's kind of no way for men to get in there. So men feel, alienated. So they've started this like Substack bro culture, whatever. So everyone in this kind of Substack bro world, I think it doesn't like women very much, first of all. Then they see a woman who comes in and says this about them that possibly rubs them in the wrong way. They also kind of are so obsessed with this idea that I'm not getting published because I'm a man. And so they perceive the issue to be the kind of gender divide, which is not true because, there are so many different women who hold kind of opposing views and then don't get published either. But they want to believe that the reason that they're not getting published is because they're male. And when a woman comes in and also doesn't get published, I think that maybe threatens their perception of I'm not getting published because I'm a male. And then that potentially might make them feel insecure because then there's clearly maybe a different reason that they're not getting published, which I have, many thoughts about that as well in terms of kind of what gets through the publishing pipeline today. But I definitely think that a woman commenting on this sort of men being excluded from the publishing space from a non-woke perspective definitely rubs them the wrong way because it might open up this thought process in them that maybe it's not just because I'm a male, maybe there's something else going on and they don't want to deal with that because that, requires actually looking into, what sorts of books are being published today, actually maybe reading some of those books, actually interacting with that world. And it's so much easier to say, oh, I'm just being shut out because I'm a man.
Well, Liza, I'm curious, what is your readership like? Is it mostly male?
It is. So it's on Substack. It is. So on kind of Instagram and YouTube, I would say my demographic is kind of 50-50 split male and female. On Substack, it does skew male. It skews older male, like 55 plus. Like
really,
we're talking. Yeah.
Wait, I mostly just don't read. Do young guys just not read? Is that?
I mean, I think a lot of people who sort of resonate with this idea of like classical education, I talk a lot about, the bygone days of the humanities. I think a lot of people who would even be exposed to that idea or who even recognize that existed once a long time ago are just older people. Because if you look at young people, this is kind of, again, what I saw when I was doing my English degree at Columbia was that there was no alternative even being presented to a lot of these people because they were taught that this is the be all and end all way of studying literature. So I think the reason that what I am saying resonates with an older crowd is they actually saw that literature was taught very differently kind of pre-1980s, let's say, right? And really pre-1960s. That's when, maybe a lot of people aren't old enough to remember that. But I think the 1960s is when this sort of shift started to take effect. And then it was more or less complete by the 1980s, 1990s. and the way that literature is taught today is very different from, what you would have seen in, the early 20th century. So I think a lot of these older people, they recognize that there's this other method of studying literature. They know that it exists. They appreciate that I'm kind of calling back to them. Maybe it's a nostalgia thing for them as well, because, they see that, they studied literature in this way, and now we're, everything's about colonialism and racism and all this. And again, the younger crowd maybe just isn't exposed to that. So they just don't see it as much of a pressing issue.
Do you guys think it's a resentment, or is it possible that they don't like that you're using terminology like Substack bro? That's really nitpicky, but a lot of these guys, they're really sensitive. Like Raven, you've seen this, right? Like guys get really sensitive over just like terminology.
I think a lot of it, potentially had to do with, the terms I was using. Again, I don't know exactly what pissed them off, but it to me, what's crazy is that they feel okay just blatantly insulting someone else, and then when they get a little bit of a taste of their own medicine, they go absolutely crazy. There was this one guy, I remember, he just was like spam posting like 10 different insults about me, and I was just like, okay, like it's completely unnecessary. When all I did was write one article about them.
I think you were a scapegoat, but I also think that people really are very irrational about terminology. You put terms in like fedora, and that's enough for guys to think that you're like some woke liberal.
Well, I think that goes back to what I said in my article, is they don't actually engage with any of my ideas. They have no idea what I stand for. They just saw this kind of like one thing, took it out of context, and then that's it. I would have much preferred them to have actually read some of what I was saying. Maybe they would have even agreed with a lot of it and kind of, again, seen me as an ally, and said they chose to alienate me because, again, I was some sort of perceived threat to their worldview.
It's kind of like gentrifying their neighborhood. You've got, like a bunch of literary guys, and you walk into their neighborhood and you're writing about similar things to them, but you use some terminology that's a little bit different from what they're used to, and they recognize that terminology is enemy terminology, right? So they think that you're the enemy, and they don't realize that you guys are actually, talking about similar things.
Yeah, that could be part of it. I don't know. Again, I think it has to do with this resentment. I think it has to do with, again, the resentment of the kind of heterodox publishing space is very male dominated, because, women tend to be more liberal. Women maybe have found a place in this sort of, mainstream publishing world. So when they maybe see a woman also who isn't getting published in the mainstream publishing world, maybe they assume that, oh, it's because she's dumb, whatever. Right. And then I think, again, so much of it is they want to preserve this image that the reason that they aren't getting published is because they're male, which is, I think, categorically false. I think there's so much else going on. Right. So it's,
I don't get published in the mainstream literary world. I don't think anybody in this podcast has been published in the mainstream literary world. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think that maybe where you went to school might have helped you, but I also think you're a great writer. I don't have any resentment towards you. I'm just like, hey, can you get me in? Can you get me an agent?
Yeah. Again, right. Like to me, when I see someone, and I have a lot of kind of, friends I've made through Substack, a lot of, I guess, allies, you can say, and a lot of them are, more successful than I am. They've been maybe writing for longer. And when I see someone who kind of occupies a similar intellectual space and who's doing better than me, my instinct is to say, hey, let's, form that kind of friendship. This is, I think, what happened with maybe me and Mega, right, who we talked about earlier, where we kind of said, okay, we're maybe talking about similar things, her thing is like the trad wife, whatever, but I think we have an overlap in terms of this kind of like classical literature education. And I think we, immediately said, hey, let's be friends. And that's just my instinct. And maybe that's more of like a womanly instinct. But I think that, again, this sort of competition-driven mindset, especially in the writing world. I had this article I wrote about a year ago now, where I sort of said, why do writers view publishing as like a zero-sum game? Like someone has to put someone else down in order to kind of be uplifted. And I think that's not the case with any other industry, where two people can be equally as successful and occupy very similar niches and still do very well. But in the writing world, there seems to be this antagonism. And yeah, I think this has always been true to some extent. I don't think this is a uniquely 21st century phenomenon. I think writers have always hated each other. If you read like any biography of any writer, the whole biography is like, this writer like shit on all of these other writers.
Slamming, they have entire chapters where they slam other writers as part of their philosophy manifestos.
You know, I think that's just the norm with writers. I think it's because writing, I think, is so personal. It being, criticized in any way, I think rubs you the wrong way as a writer, versus in any other field, it maybe is a little bit less personal, and that criticism doesn't, affect you as much. So I think there's this kind of amongst writers, and writers are, by default, just very sensitive people. You kind of have to be a little bit sensitive to be a writer. That's just, the reality of being any sort of artist. And so you couple that with...
I wish that was true. Let me just go on record saying that I wish you were right.
Well, I mean, I think you have to have a little bit, at least, of a unconventional side, let's say, which maybe that sensitivity, maybe it's something else.
That's fair.
There's something that makes you a little bit weird when you're a writer, and I think the maybe threat perception is a little bit off. Like writers, again, perceive other writers as threats. I, again, am maybe coming at this from more of just like the experience of having started my own business and being in this kind of entrepreneurial world as well, where so much of it is collaboration. Everyone is like, helping each other out. Everyone's like, giving each other tips and tricks, and I don't see any of that in the writing world. There's a little bit of you have your allies and you have your friends, but I don't think it's as much of an open collaborative space. There's a lot of people, when they think writers, they think of like maybe the like French salon with like Hemingway and Fitzgerald like bouncing ideas off of each other, and I don't think that is the majority of writers at all. And Hemingway also turned on Fitzgerald eventually and didn't like him very much. So there's this sort of antagonism towards the end of his life. There's this antagonism that you have with a lot of writers, and I think that's just part of being a writer. It's probably this true also of other artists. I'm sure people in Hollywood hate each other.
I was going to jump in and say that with my literary journal Jokes Review, shout out, I do like a semi-monthly like meetup. And I invite all the writers in the community in Sacramento, and just put it out there. And who shows up, like hilarious to me, is just musicians. Like no other writers show up. I had like one guy who's a journalist show up one time, but it's just like the musicians who I also just kind of like know some of those crowds. Yeah. And writers just aren't that down to socialize. Which is unfortunate. Not always. I know like in the Substack crowd, one friend of mine, Dane Fitzgerald, does show up, and he's more of a writer, but like. Yeah, I don't even know. Like just the world of being a writer, I think most writers are just kind of like stereotypical, I stay at home and don't do too much.
It's not like that in New York at all. You've got hundreds of people going to literary events every night.
That's true, but those are like the cream of the crop, though, probably, right?
No, they're not. No, a lot of them are like indie literary underground writers. Some are like dissident types. I mean, like a lot of them, they're just like cliquey, and the literary scene is kind of like their social life. They're not introverted.
Rachel, tell them to come to Sacramento. Come to Northern California. We need more.
I mean, I'll come. I'll hang out with you and Dane. I'm not cliquey. That's why I don't go to those literary parties. I kind of just would prefer to write. We write. We don't need to go to these literary parties. I mean, I don't know, Raven. Do you go to literary parties to mingle and network?
Oh, I can't say that I do that very much, but I also wouldn't ever really characterize myself as a writer. I'm more of a talker and a socializer. And I think that this is a really good point about just like personality, introversion and extroversion. I think that does make a difference. And also like pointing out that different cities have different identities. Like in New York, there's an identity around being a literary person, and it's a hub for literature in the world. And and the status thing, I think, is another theme coming up here of like, how do you establish status for yourself within a little subculture, and how do you create sense of shared meaning and words with another group of people who are in your literary scene. So it's very interesting, but it does kind of remind me of the gatekeeping of the art world. Like there's a lot of gatekeeping there as opposed to the entrepreneurial world. People don't necessarily share like how they got into a gallery or how they moved into the professional art world, because there is a limited number of spots. It's a very elite thing, and you have to kind of learn the codes to get through. And I think that some of that is about people's self-image as well, and maintaining those gates keeps the culture intact in certain ways. But at the same time, like thinking about the real world literary scene and the Substack world, these are different ecosystems.
Yeah.
Like they may have people who are moving between the two, but it's totally different. Like, yes, you're writing, and that's the medium in some respect. But I mean, if you're like a guy sitting on his typewriter for hours a day, like just drinking whiskey and smoking cigarettes, and like all you're doing is sitting there with your own thoughts and creating a work, that is so different than logging onto Substack and having this relationship where there's it's an embedded social dynamic. So it feels more like a society of letters than like the solo writer, getting wasted and banging out a novel or something like that.
Yeah, the status point is interesting because it's hard to tell how you even do get status in the literary world aside from followers on like Substack, because no one buys books anymore. I don't know if you guys saw like the Lindy West thing, but like Lindy West is like globally famous right now for her new book. Nobody bought it. It sold 3,000 copies, which is hilarious. I mean, like, there's just no such thing as the book market anymore. So your status really comes from just like, how many followers you have.
But Lisa, don't you sell a lot of books? I mean, you're on a mainstream publisher. Correct me if I'm wrong. Who are you published by? How many books do you have out?
So I'm not mainstream published. I'm not. So I'm working with I am working with Penguin currently on a book. I don't know if it's a done deal. There's still it's up in the air. I have been working with an editor at a mainstream publishing house, so I do have a little bit of exposure there. But we have not signed anything yet. It's still kind of in the development stages. They reached out to me from my Substack. So there is some overlap between, I think, having the social media numbers and getting the attention of these places. And that was kind of what I was told when I went into this is, if you have the social media numbers, eventually someone in mainstream publishing will pick you up. And that, I guess is starting to happen for me. But I think, what happens with a lot of people these days is the way that you acquire that literary fame is through social media, basically. And you see all these kind of writers who are trying to be like influencers because that's really the only way to make it. And when you write even like a nonfiction book proposal, the number one factor that influences whether they're going to take you on or not is what platform you have. So what your social media numbers are and like what your readership is like, because you're right, the physical books don't sell anymore. So much of it is, I mean, if you look at these sort of like big, like cultural critics in various spaces, the way that they get their books out there is they go on podcasts, they talk about, something, and then at the end they say, hey, pick up my book. and that's how they sell books, right? That's really just the only way is through social media. These days, there's not as much kind of physical advertising going on. Like, yes, you can still go to Barnes and Noble and there's maybe that like new releases bookshelf, whatever. But, the vast majority of people these days sell books through social media. I mean, I even get a lot of people who will email me and say, I have this new book coming out. Like, would you do like a book review or book promotion? I have to turn most of them down because I just don't have time with all of the inquiries that are coming in. But again, that's how books are marketed these days, is through social media, through book reviews. Obviously with mainstream publishing, the goal is you get a book published and then you get your book reviewed in the New York Times, whatever, then obviously you're set. But other than that, it's all social media. Every single writer is becoming social media person. Yeah.
Well, I met a famous writer who bought her house with her book sale. She has like 8 mystery novels out. So
that's the thing. Yeah. If you get into like a genre world, you can still sell a lot of books. When I worked for a literary agency, this is kind of hilarious to me, but like, I just, every day I would read like 10 manuscripts or whatever, just going through them. And there were a ton of them. And it was just hard to find anything good, for one thing. But also, at the end of the day, the woman who I worked for, she just wanted cozy mysteries. So I would find these like super epic novels that I was like way into. And it's some old guy, no social media presence or whatever, but like super fun book. You can't take it because like no one's going to buy it. No one cares about this person. And then she just wants cozy mysteries at the end of the day anyway. So it is a catch-22 for someone who would just, and God bless all of them, are not on social media. Like they're living the dream, just like being in their cave, writing their novels that no one's ever read. That's like the literary dream, I think. But like being on social media and like being, a slave to clicks or whatever, that's like, that's where the status lies. But that may not be where the true literary heart of, humanity lies. I don't know.
God, I'm so ready for some disruption to happen in this industry.
Me too, Raven. Me too.
So bad. And then you look at the slop that you see in like the children's section, and you're like, I can't believe that they're distributing this bullshit. And in the meantime, we don't have like great novels being published from some old guy who's been sitting in his house for 50 years writing an epic story. I'm like, what is happening? I mean, are you gonna bring that? Like, is that like, let's fucking, I would love to see some movement in that space. I'm so tired of this.
It's pretty bad. Yeah. I mean, so I write literary fiction, and I've straight up just had agents tell me like, just write genre fiction. Like, write a mystery, write this. And it's just not my thing. And I don't want to be told what to write. And at this point, I have a sense of exactly the sort of book that I would need to write in order to get published in the fiction space. And it's just like, I don't want to write a book just to appeal to some literary gatekeeper. Like, I could do it. But I want to write, what I want to write. And there's kind of no room for originality. There are so many different things that, literary agents will look for in terms of your opening pages or the way that a book is pitched. The other thing that really bothers me is that the way that books are pitched today are on the basis of existing books, right? So just by default, you can't write anything original because you have to tell them that my book is similar to these 3 books, and my book is, Taylor Swift meets, I don't know, comedy romance, whatever, right? So there's this kind of, I had an agent tell me like, you have to do like a crossover of this thing plus this thing and then market your book that way. I think really bothers me because again, it's working off of, I am just mimicking what other people are doing. And then you have like tropes in the genre fiction world. And there's so much of it that I think it just stifles the quest for originality. And that's why you have these like very flat books. The other thing is the way the books are written. Agents will always preference kind of easily readable, like minimalist prose, because a lot of the times they're just, scrolling through these submissions on their phone. So anything that maybe you can't read on like a busy subway that takes a little bit of brain power, they're just going to, throw in the trash because it's not easily accessible. So there's so much going on in terms of kind of what you can write, how it can be written, or how optimally it should be written, and then couple that with the like woke woman thing, and you just have this complete recipe for disaster in terms of, you know, what sorts of books are being published today.
You do kind of have to like see it from the publisher's perspective too, though. And this is like to Raven's point about how we need a disruption, because these poor people are like, dude, if we don't sell 100,000 books next month, my job's gone. You know what I mean? Like, I work with this guy, Zoltan Istvan. He just ran for governor of California. And he said that all of his editors were just laid off over the last couple of months. And he used to write for Newsweek and some other big publications. And he can't write there anymore. So all of his editors were laid off. I mean, the whole industry is literally just like dying underneath our feet. And so everybody who's like, please just write genre fiction, they're like, yes, please sell some fucking books for me. That's what they're truly asking, because they don't know how to do it because no one's buying books anymore. So it's hard.
I guess my question is, you know, I have a fairly established presence on Instagram, YouTube, and Substack. I think I would be able to market books. The book I'm working on right now is a nonfiction book, and you know, they seem to want to work with me with that because they know that I have the numbers to sell the book, right? Why isn't it the same for fiction? Fiction, they'll publish people with no social media presence, nothing. But writers are told to establish the social media presence, to, you know, have this audience, whatever. If you're a writer and you say, I have 100,000 social media followers, I will sell this book no matter what, they still don't take it. So there's clearly something ideological
Genre.
going on
Okay,
that I
so
think,
superhero movies. It's like superhero movies. It's genre fiction. People, they want to watch superhero movies, you know, on the big screen, and they want to read genre fiction. That's just what sells.
That's true. That's true, but there's still a lot of really bad literary fiction being published.
Yeah.
If that were the case, I think I would agree with this point if it were basically just genre fiction being published. Then I would say, fine, I understand literary fiction doesn't sell. But there is a lot of the literary fiction being published. It's all just ideological. It's like, you know, some queer whatever. So it seems like there's something ideologically driven in in literary fiction as opposed to genre fiction, where maybe they know that literary fiction isn't going to sell, and so they need to publish some of it anyway because they have to have a semblance of, you know, whatever. So then they use that space as an excuse to basically push their ideology. That's my theory there, because otherwise no literary fiction would be published ever.
I mean, I think you're right about the ideology, but I also think that there's a big split between people who write fiction and people who write, let's just call it commentary or philosophy or political theory. You know, this is the kind of writing that normally does get published on Substack. We are the kinds of people who usually have shows on YouTube, and we often do need to build big social media followings. Where somebody on, you know, the fiction wavelength, they might not need a social media presence at all. They can be like, hey, I just wrote a cool fiction book. And they might be more willing to, you know, navigate the publishing network. Maybe they have more patience, you know, than firebrands like us. I don't know. I think a lot of it, that these are two different worlds. These are two different universes.
I just looked this up, guys. This is according to the Chicago Tribune. Around 80% of book sales are from women. I think just that alone is a lot.
There you go. Yeah, that'll skew the selection.
80%, like that's crazy.
So that's why they're ideologically captured.
Yeah. So part of what's happening is that the majority of books that make money for publishers are romance novels. So it's something like,
it's pornography.
It was like half of all publishing revenue is romance. It's all pornography. So the women who are reading today are basically indulging in romance, erotica, in the same way that kind of men in the manosphere are watching a lot of porn.
Yeah.
And that's just the reality.
That's
and
what
that,
it is. It's the
makes,
pornification of publishing.
yeah.
So Lisa,
And that's
how
also
much
terrifying.
How much would the publisher have to offer you for you to write a steamy romance novel?
I don't think I would do it. No money can buy my soul.
She can't be bought.
Price for everything. Come on. What's the price?
Oh,
$1 million.
no.
Okay, I'm Penguin.
No.
$1 million. Steamy romance.
I would do a steamy romance for 20K because I would just make it containing all of my social and political theories. I'd find a way to throw them in.
Oh yeah.
Never
you
saw
would
that
do
one
it
coming.
so well.
Never knew that one. I just pulled it over and hey, I got a romance novel. Eh?
Oh, there you go.
Oh yeah.
I mean, I guess that's one way to go about it. I mean, I don't know. The last novel I wrote, and I have a lot of different novels that I've been trying to get published before I gave up and went to nonfiction. I really wrote it with the publishing world in mind, and it's still, and I put kind of a lot of myself into it while kind of maintaining these like tropes that the publishing world likes, and it still didn't do very well. I got a lot of manuscript requests, but it still didn't go anywhere. And again, I think it needs to be just kind of completely lined up with what they want to do. It can't just have elements of what they want. It has to be like, this is exactly, what we want to publish and the type of like tropes, whatever. So I think even then it's hard to kind of sneak your own thing into a novel. And, I had one of my novels, I got 24 manuscript requests, which is a lot. And, what that meant was clearly my opening pages were working, they were hooked. And then the novel, I think, kind of starts off as this like career woman who's, angry at the world. And it's like this like feminist power or whatever. And then it ends in her realizing that actually, she should stop being a career woman because it's detrimental to her and just go get married and have kids. And I think that ending, was the reason that book didn't get picked up, because clearly publishers seem to like it, but then the ending, I had one agent ask me to rewrite the ending completely. So it's just, there's even a limit in terms of what messages you can put in. So apparently you can't write a book about a career woman who realizes that her purpose in life is actually just, to have a family. That's bad. So, a lot of different things going on in publishing, but I definitely do think that there needs to be a disruption, because otherwise we're going to keep seeing these like very terrible books published. And clearly I'm not the only person saying this. It's most readers. Yeah.
Okay, well, there has been an actual drastic cultural shift over the last couple of years. Everybody always says, if somebody says some like woke bullshit on Twitter, like there's just a pile on, and then it's kind of like, bro, it's not 2018 anymore, get over it or whatever. And that's actually true. It's not just like a little Twitter pile on. Like the culture has actually shifted. We aren't as woke as we were in 2018, 2019. Do you think that that's ever going to infiltrate the literary space, or do you think it's just like too far gone?
I'm working on a piece about this, where I basically argue that I don't think that the de-wokification of society is going to have any influence on publishing and academia, because they are the people who created the woke thing in the first place. So they are the ones who are kind of latching on to this woke thing. So if anything, my theory is that they're just going to double down on this because they're seeing their kind of, precious ideology being chipped away at. And they're just going to say, hey, we need to do more woke stuff because this woke thing is dying. I don't think that that's going to shift anytime soon, because again, there's also a really big disconnect between what publishers think people want to read and what people actually want to read, especially in the literary fiction space. Because if you look at literary fiction, no one reads it. Absolutely no one. It's just a bunch of kind of MFA grads writing for each other. And outside of that, no one is reading the literary fiction being published. And there are a lot of people who are actually interested in contemporary literature, but just don't read it because it's just unreadable at this point. So I think that the issue is that publishers primarily interact with these sorts of like MFA New York crowds and forget that there's a whole country, and in many cases a whole world, of people who actually do want to read good contemporary literature, but just have fully moved away from it. And I think I count myself in this camp of people who just, primarily reads classic literature at this point, because I've never been amazed by a contemporary novel, and it's, for the most part, sort of been a waste of my time. I mean, there's kind of the older crowd of contemporary writers from like the 90s, sure, but everything, like all the new debut voices that are being published today are just absolutely terrible.
I like some.
So, sure.
I feel like there's a different trajectory, and I think it's actually a lot uglier. I think that the anti-woke stuff is going to become very popular in literature, and it's going to be horrible. It's going to be like
Okay.
the lowest
I feel you, Rachel.
common, like the most lowest common denominator, like sex and fart jokes and action movie type stuff. Like muscle men going on big adventures to kill dumb horror with purple hair, kind of that's where I think we're headed. And I think we're gonna actually like miss woke literature. It's gonna be so bad. I mean, because that's what I see happening on the everything platform. And I think that that's kind of like everything trickles down from that, because that's where all the venture capitalists are. I want to be wrong. I want to see really good non-woke literature, but I think it's going to be really bad.
Interesting. Well, would that be maybe primarily confined to genre fiction? And isn't that happening already? Because in the genre fiction world, I don't think you have as much of the woke stuff. I think it's just, this kind of, fast-paced romance or action or whatever, spy mystery. And I don't think that genre fiction is as wokeified. I've maybe heard that romance is a little bit more woke in general, but, I don't think that there are these like crime novels being published for men that are super woke. So it seems
not crime.
Yeah, right. But I think anything that's not maybe like literary fiction or upmarket fiction, I do think that it doesn't have as much of a woke problem. It's more of kind of this like serious literature, or whatever you want to call it, has to say something very left-leaning about society. So if anything, Rachel, I think what you're identifying maybe has already happened.
Well, yeah, because I'm kind of thinking of like, do you guys know like Dan Baltic, like Nutcracker? Or
New Ritual Press is doing great for an independent publisher, and they've got a really good roster of writers. And I mean, I don't know how many copies they're selling, but they've got a great internet presence, and they've got a lot of cult notoriety. They're doing great, and their books are great. I don't think that's what's going to be the mainstream, though. I think the mainstream is going to be like really bad anti-woke action books. I mean,
if that's ever going to be mainstream, it's going to be stuff that 80% of women want to read. You know what I mean? It's like, unless the consumer base changes, the mainstream industry is always going to be skewed towards who's purchasing the most books. And I mean, I think what's interesting here is that our lives are so dominated now by our eyeballs being attached to some sort of media. And so there's competition between, let's say, reading a book or reading Twitter posts or whatever, or reading Substack posts. So while you may be seeing some like crazy meme crap or stuff coming up out of the repressed, I don't know, subconscious of the society in a post-woke era, the idea that would then formalize itself into a full-blown industry that's investing money in producing. I mean, the thing about this industry, it's not like drop shipping. They have to fucking publish books and put them in warehouses and pay for them to sit there. It's so much, like the whole concept, the whole pipeline of the industry is working in a model that is just coming to an end, and we'll see how they make it through. I think I'm excited about going harder in disrupting this. Like, I want to see some fucking action. I would love that. I mean, let's burn some books.
Good action. I mean,
like, come on, this is ridiculous. Like, I kind of going back to the beginning here with these guys and their grievance projections. Like, you can see why people are pissed and are trying to find a new place for themselves, but like wallowing in this grievance is not going to actually do anything. And I think it's better to go out there and form your literary scene. I think it's totally what's needed, is because it's taste, right? And it like the depth of this, what people are creating using the I mean, we haven't got into this, but what words are and how language emerges in different eras, how people think and how that's connected to the way that they express themselves, and then how, you know, in a healthy literary ecosystem, a healthy publishing ecosystem, that, you know, these words that are coming from people's experiences then move into, you know, more fast-paced publishing, like newspapers, through critique and responses, and that creates new waves of thinking. I mean, it can be so beautiful in an era where you have kind of, you know, a living culture around this, cultivating it. But right now it seems like that actually, anyone who has that type of visionary mindset, who wants to create a world like that, has to kind of do the fundamentals to even be able you know, to get to the place where there's a whole ecosystem of people who are co-creating this new literate scene. Because that's the other element. I mean, we kind of touched on this a bit, but like literacy rates are also dropping, right? So
I wanted to ask Liza about this, actually. Liza, you just published an essay about how you read, what was it, college submission essays, and you just noticed that the quality has gone way down and people are just having a hard time understanding basic ideas, that sort of thing. Tell us a little bit about that and what you think the future is going to hold for just, I don't know, people right now who are in high school, if there's hope for them to ever even write the great American novel anymore, or are they just no longer capable of that?
So it's pretty bad. So what's happening, or what I said in the article, is that it's essentially this idea of you are what you read, right? So if you read good writing, you will be a good writer. That's always been true, because you start to, you know, internalize the rhythm of good writing, or this vocabulary, or the way that sentences are structured. And people used to read books, right? What's happening now is that this new generation of students who are either graduating high school or just coming into high school, this kind of tail end of Gen Z, beginning of Gen Alpha, they have never had to really read anything without ChatGPT or these other AI LLMs being at their disposal, right? So they do their math homework with ChatGPT. They read book summaries with ChatGPT. They ask ChatGPT to outline essays for them, right? So they're using AI for literally everything. They're maybe getting like AI summaries of like news articles, let's say. So what's happening is that the majority of content that they're reading is AI written. Couple that with, then they go on social media. You go on Instagram, like 80% of Instagram captions for like Instagram reels are now AI written. So they're reading those captions as well. I've noticed that I do a lot of work for Instagram. When I'm scrolling, it's like you can very clearly tell when someone has an AI written caption. It's probably close to that number. I'd be interested in seeing some statistics on this, but again, 80% AI written. So what's happening is that the majority of writing that these students are exposed to is AI writing. Now, AI has this very distinct writing style, if one can even call it that, where it uses a lot of words to say very little, right? It'll just have these like broad statements because again, it can't think like a human, and it really struggles when you ask it to get into particulars. It can make these kind of blanket statements because again, it's the way it works is it takes information and then it spits out a prediction of information. So it has these large blanket statements, these like very vague general ideas without really understanding what the idea is actually trying to say. And students will read this sort of writing. That's, again, the majority of the written content that they're being exposed to. Maybe they're reading news articles. They're certainly not reading books anymore, right? So the writing that they read from age like 10 to 17 is basically all AI writing. And so what happens is the more writing they read here, the more their own writing starts to sound like AI writing, because again, the way you develop your voice as a writer is you read far and wide, and then, you take bits and pieces from various authors, and eventually you start to, sound unique and like yourself. And so these students, again, they only read ChatGPT writing. The writing that they then produce on their own starts to sound like ChatGPT. And the crazy thing is that at first, I really thought that every single one of my students was using ChatGPT to write their essays. And some of them are, some of them are just like flat out turning in AI written articles. But then there's another cohort of students who uses AI for, all of these kind of research things, but then writes their own essays. And the essays that they produce sound exactly like ChatGPT, because the only writing that they've ever been exposed to is AI. And that is terrifying, because everyone starts to sound the same. Everyone's writing is sort of like vague, like broad statements. There's like string of broad statements that don't really say anything. They're maybe not exposed to this idea of, concreteness or specificity, because so much of what they're reading is so broad and vague. And again, they use so many words to say absolutely nothing. And that, to me, I think is going to represent the future of human thought. Now, again, obviously there are going to be some exceptions. There's going to be, some wonder kid somewhere who reads a lot of books and can write well. And so what I say in the article is those people who are actually reading books, who are writing on their own, are probably going to be the most valuable assets to the future of our society, because they're going to be the only people who can actually think through writing, as opposed to, putting forth these broad blanket statements. So, and just something I've observed from working with a lot of students, there's definitely been a shift from 10 years ago to now in terms of the quality of student writing.
That's scary.
Yeah, that's brutal.
Yeah. So, we'll see what happens, but I am a little bit terrified.
Do you see a gender divide there? Like, is there like women do better than men in that context, or?
Not necessarily. I think it's both men and women writing in the same way. I will say the boys, this has always been true. The boys take a little bit longer to figure out how to do anything at the high school level. The 15-year-old girls are already little adults. They already know everything. They know how to do things. The 15-year-old boys are like little children running around. And then by age like 16, 17, they start to catch up. So, I don't think there's too much of a gender divide. I think what's happening is that everyone is just using ChatGPT for everything. I'm curious to see what will happen with the younger generation, who was like 3 years old when ChatGPT came out. Because right now we only have the kids who ChatGPT came out when they were like early high school, right? So at least maybe when they were like 10, maybe they were reading actual books. Who knows? So I think it's going to get even worse with the kids who, are like very little right now. Maybe we'll grow up in 10 years and we'll see what happens by the time they hit kind of the end of high school. But I genuinely think that what's going to happen is that anyone who can write or express themselves coherently will have a much better time on the job market, because they're just going to stand out.
You think there's going to be a job market?
I do. I do. I'm not an AI pessimist. I just think the sorts of jobs that will be available are going to shift. So like one kind of new job you're seeing crop up is like AI tester these days, right? Where you're kind of sitting there and you're like testing the AI model. That was not a job that was even a thing like 5 years ago. So I think there is just going to be more of those jobs. We'll maybe have fewer of the traditional. I think probably most kind of like back office type jobs are going to go away, where you're just kind of crunching numbers. But I think anything that requires human brain power, which there are a lot of jobs that do require human brain power versus AI, I think they're going to stay. I think there are just going to be fewer of each type of job. Like if you take something like law, for example, I still think there are going to be lawyers. It's just going to be like the top 5% of competent lawyers, and all of the kind of mediocre lawyers are probably going to go away. So I think it's just there's going to be a shift towards people who can think for themselves. Again, writing, my guess is that that's going to have a big part in that. And there are going to be new jobs created, like AI tester or something else to do with AI. And then, our advancements in robotics aren't that good yet. So any sort of kind of manufacturing or kind of manual labor jobs, I think, are going to be around for a while.
I think it's a toss-up. Yeah, I think that's a good analysis. But I think there's going to be like big surprises. My kind of hope is that, and I think that again goes to Raven's point, I hope that we discover new things going forward in the next couple of decades. Because maybe we are supposed to just evolve past the novel. Like we evolved past opera and it's fine and no one really bemoans that. It still exists, but it's
I bemoan it.
Well, I mean, like I know people who go to the opera like regularly in San Francisco. So there's a world for it, but like it's not exactly nothing. That's not like the beating heart of culture anymore, and that's fine. It's great. But like there's so much new shit out there that we just don't even know exists. And I think that like I hope we find it, and I hope we don't become brain dead before we find it, because I think there's just a lot of creative expression that we could, new forms of media, et cetera, that exist out there.
Not to be like the eternal AI optimist, because I have a lot of issues with the people that are funding AI right now and their insane moral corruption. Let me just leave it at that. But if everybody's writing slop, aren't the human writers going to stand out the most because the writing isn't ChatGPT? Isn't that going to create a bigger market for originality and innovation?
I think so. I think that's kind of what I was saying with the students who aren't using ChatGPT are going to stand out. I think, assuming that our culture operates on uniqueness, which I'm not sure that it does as much as I would like it to, but assuming that it does, then yes, they will stand out. We'll see.
Not just with writing though, but I mean with jobs also.
Yeah.
I mean with everything, people who are not using AI, who are doing things their own way. I mean, it's kind of like the return of the blue collar world. You see manufacturing, you see industrial metals coming back, you see people that are building factories now, and you're kind of seeing a return to labor, because all the jobs have been taken by AI. Now people are being really innovative with that kind of industry instead. And I think we're going to potentially see revitalization in urban development and that kind of thing.
I hope so. Yeah.
I've also seen, especially amongst like Gen Z, there's a lot of people who are just doing like YouTube or like social media, and just like being creative that way and making, pretty good money there. I think there's Gen Z is like very entrepreneurial. So I think there are a lot of kind of these like entrepreneurial types that are cropping up that are just kind of people figuring out how to do their own thing rather than like working an office job. So you might see a little bit more of that as just a lot of these like random freelancers finding just like random ways to make money and to, do their own thing. So I think that also might be a big thing that we'll see in the next like 10 years or so.
You know what? I just have like a really basic question for everybody right now.
Sure.
What is your favorite book? Just first answer that comes to your mind.
I would say right now, Journey to the End of the Night by Saline.
That's a good answer. I like it.
The Sound and the Fury by William Faulkner.
Ooh, classics.
I really love The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy by Douglas Adams.
That's a fun one.
That's so kitsch. That's like Generation X material.
I know, right?
I like how you're so young compared to me, but I was adopted by Generation X, and that was like one of my first books. You know what? I'm gonna say the Illuminati trilogy, just to like stay in the genre.
Nice.
I'm gonna go for the Robert Anton Wilson shout out. You're into that too, like Hakeem Bey. Peter, you were influenced by that kind of
big influence on me too.
Literature, the Discordian era. It was still like okay to be cringe then because cringe was cool in an absurdist way, and we didn't realize that it was cringe because back then cringe was cool.
Rachel, I say this all the time to my Jokes Review folks. We need a new Principia. How do you say it?
Principia Discordia.
For our generation.
Cringe was cool because it wasn't cringe. Every generation's cool becomes the next generation's cringe. It's an eternal cycle. It's like you're hanging out with your subgenius friends and you think you're cool because you're, better than all the pinks, the normies, right? You're so cool because you're into chaos, and you're into like the weird synchronicity of the number 23. And then the next generation's like, wow, you guys are some lame NPC faggots. Like whoa, man. No, we were awesome back then, So I'm not really sure what the next generation's Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy would even look like. I feel like they would just get made fun of for not being based enough, honestly. I'm post right. I'm post right. Are you guys post right? I don't think I'm like right anymore because the people on the right are just like, whoa, I'm so much cooler than you because I don't care about anything. I'm so beyond everything. I'm like, no, I'm not beyond everything. I like things. I like classical literature. I want to read more Shakespeare, not less. Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I probably would say the same about myself. I still, I'm right because I like tradition and I like old things, but I'm not sure that is has anything to do with the right these days.
I mean, my favorite book is actually One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest by Ken Kesey, and a lot of people think that's a great American novel, and this is the same genre as the Electric Kool-Aid Acid Test and Tom Wolfe and the whole beatnik era, that kind of moved into the hippie era before it became super lame. And there was like this whole, the great American novel. And I saw this debate and people were like, oh, it's The Great Gatsby. And they were like, no, it's Paradise Lost. And, every single book that was named was actually good, and then it was, Miga, right? Is that how to pronounce her name? She had made a controversial comment about how Moby Dick sucked. What remind me of the tweet? What was it? She said, like, how can you like Moby Dick after you've read the Odyssey? Was that what it was?
Oh, that's interesting.
Something to that effect. And she got a lot of backlash for just saying that Moby Dick wasn't as good as the Odyssey, which I agree with. Why was that a controversial thing to say?
I agree with that.
But you know what? Moby Dick is still better than, like a lot of literature the majority of literature that comes out today. Let's not kid ourselves. We can have like this good, alt lit scene, but we're not going to get anything like the Odyssey now. I want to be wrong. We're talking about like, what's the next Hitchhiker's Guide? What's the next Odyssey?
We still have people like William Gibson who are out there writing like thick ass books like this that like go into like deep world creation, etc. But like that dude's like what, 70? Yeah, like to this point, I don't know if anybody who is 19 is going to be writing the next Odyssey. I just, like I personally love novellas. It's always been my favorite like form of art, and that's primarily what I write. I just think it's just like so consumable, and you can pack a ton of big ideas in just like a little book. But like that's a sign of like the times of when I grew up, like, and I can't help that.
Oh.
I just hope that people can get over this ironic detachment, because I think that that's killing literature as much as wokeness.
Yes.
You can complain about wokeness for like a decade, how much can you say about woke being bad? Yeah, woke is bad, kill woke, like I hope woke never comes back, and it's not wanted. We should clear it out of the universities. We should clear it out of the publishing houses. We should make sure that woke is a thing of the past. Woke is dead. But we need sincerity. We need sincerity.
Yes.
I want to pitch this to Liza. I want to pitch this. Liza, are you familiar with metamodernism?
No.
Because so look this up. I always end up talking about this on the show, which is funny. But so I think that we can't go back to a purely non-ironic thing. I think that with after we did postmodernism, we can't go back. It's just part of the ether and just always gonna be with us at some level. And pure sincerity is cringe, in not a great way, I think. But there's this new thing called metamodernism, which it oscillates between postmodernism and modernism. So you get sincerity with honest millennial irony, and it marries it in this very beautiful way. And this was Dave Eggers and a lot of writers like that, where completely 100% tear jerking sincere, and then you're laughing about it at the next chapter or whatever. And Wes Anderson does this too. This is I think a theme of a lot of the greatest works being created right now. So I'm a big fan. I totally hear what Rachel just said. I totally absolutely hear that. But I think that we can't escape irony. I think that it's almost dishonest to try to fully remove it from ourselves, because it's so us.
The guy, Hansi Frankereit, I think Raven might know him too. Isn't he on?
Yeah, they're all it's a scene here in Stockholm. And
metamodernism. Metamodernism is kind of the, genre, so to speak. But I really do think there is a place for sincerity, not to be that infinite jest guy. I don't want that to become my new identity. But we've become so detached from the center of reality.
Yeah. True.
We've bifurcated into these decentralized nodes of these cults, and then be oh, well, it's not a cult, it's a network state, or it's not a Discord channel, it's a cult, or it's not a cult, it's a Discord channel. But whatever it is, you're boring. I'm not trying to be an asshole here, but I feel there's not really any substance behind this.
Yeah, I mean, I think the ironic thing really does bother me. I disagree that we can't get back to sincerity. I think if you look at the film industry, right? Films used to be very wholesome, pre, let's say 1980s, and then this sort of ironic wave settled in around kind of the 2000s, and now you can't really watch a film without it being either disturbing or ironic or something that I think puts kind of a layer between the sincerity of the filmmaker and what the audience receive, right?
Wholesome film.
I think we don't
television.
Right. It doesn't exist anymore. You can't produce anything wholesome. I think the same is true for writing. But I think the thing is that a lot of people like wholesome because it reminds us that there's sort of this, purpose to life. Not everything is, absurd. I think it helps us, maybe cope with the world. So I think that there's a market for wholesomeness. And I think if, it were allowed to be brought out, I do think that people would resonate with it. And I think the other thing that's happening is that there's sort of the hyper online crowd that, kind of sees everything as ironic. And then there are people who are less online. And I think the meta modern or the ironic world hasn't really reached them. And I think that crowd especially maybe would welcome a return to sincerity. So I think there's a place for it in our art.
My little pushback to that would be that, and we should probably wrap this up in a minute, but I think my pushback, the world is absurd. And to say that it's not, we have to kind of pretend like it's not. But Donald Trump 2 days ago almost said he was going to blow up and destroy an entire race of people. And like that's
Civilization.
absurd. Like that's absurd because he actually could do it. Like the nations threaten this all the time, but he actually could. That's like we live in this truly absurd world where you can just with the push of a button destroy nations and like
that means that we need more wholesomeness. Like I was watching this show, The Tribe. It was made maybe 20 years ago. It's about, the world ends, there's a zombie apocalypse, and there's only kids left, and they're just like a community and they help each other out and they go through trials and tribulations. And I just found it so nice to be watching a wholesome show. I mean, it was about a zombie apocalypse. Maybe that was a little meta-modern, but they're just a community of kids, being there for each other.
Guys, I do have hope. I have some hope as a rail like for the ironic world. So I have a daughter who's 4, and like I'm literally sitting next to this book, and like my life is like primarily like wholesomeness, and it still exists. Like I read this to my daughter this morning, and it's just like it's nothing but cute animals, and there's a whole publishing world that's just like, hey, it's a cute animal, you know what I mean? So like it's out there, it does exist, and I actually kind of think more people need to have kids because then half of your life is just like nothing but sincerity and niceness and that sort of thing. And then you get hungry for irony when you're around a child all day who is so sincere. So, anyway, that's another like pocket of the universe.
Beautiful.
Maybe we could have a sincere irony, this is what I do actually. Like my way to be Straussian in my sincerity is to say everything ironically in an ultra sincere way. I do a deadpan sincerity, but I mask it with irony. Then I'm able to kind of get past the censors.
I'd call that meta modern, I think.
I thought I was just talking in a way that was acceptable so I wouldn't get crucified.
That too.
Lisa, where can we check out your Substack, your Instagram? What's the best way for people to find you? Tell our listeners everything about where they can check you out.
Absolutely. My Substack is Pens and Poison. You can find me at pensandpoison.org. My YouTube is Pens and Poison, and my Instagram handle is Pens and Poison. Very simple. I post kind of videos to YouTube and Instagram, and then I post kind of longer form essays on Substack.